Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Blitzkrieg, our own strategic affairs show. What is happening in Pakistan is extremely interesting. We might have lost track for a little while because we're dealing with our own COVID pandemic here. However, the entire GSP Plus episode, as we saw, done in the European Union Parliament, is something which is of great interest to Pakistan watchers, especially in India. I have with me Sushant Sareen, needs no introduction, a very famous voice, especially a person who's been involved in Pakistan affairs from the Indian perspective, keeps a very, very close hawk eye on what's going on inside Pakistan. Sushant, a very warm welcome to our show once again.
Thanks, Gaurav, for having me.
Sushant, this entire episode about GSP Plus, if you could just take us through what exactly is GSP Plus, what happened, and why is Pakistan feeling so hammered today? I mean, their media is going ballistic, and as usual, conspiracy theories all around. What is this?
So, Gaurav, this whole GSP thing goes back to 2010 or thereabouts, when the massive floods hit Pakistan. And at that point of time, GSP Plus basically is a somewhat preferential trade arrangement where, they are given certain concessions on duties and other things on products which actually the least developed countries are exporting. Now, in 2010, because of the devastation caused by the floods, the European Union decided that they will give this facility to Pakistan. At that point of time, there were 2 or 3 countries, including India, which initially objected because they said that this is going to be a violation of WTO commitments. Then what happened was that India lifted its objections and actually supported the GSP Plus because on the back channel, and it was the Manmohan Singh government at that point of time, there were certain negotiations going on. On the back channel, it was the Pakistanis had assured India that they will give us a MFN treatment. They will give us the under the WTO. They will accord that status to us. So we said, okay, fine. So it was a bit of a quid pro quo, and so we kind of lifted our objections. The Europeans went ahead and gave this to the Pakistanis, something which improved the competitiveness of Pakistani products, especially, cotton and cotton textile products, which is roughly about 60% of Pakistani exports. So they got a greater access into Europe, a cheaper access into Europe, and their exports to Europe over a period of time started increasing. And in a manner of speaking, we shot ourselves in the foot because we more or less compete in similar products. So if you give your competitors' goods a certain advantage, then obviously your own products will suffer some. But we nevertheless went ahead because of certain geopolitical, geostrategic calculations of the then government. The Pakistanis, of course, reneged on the MFN status agreement or the assurances they had given us. Meanwhile, the Europeans had a list of about 27 or 29, I forget the precise number of criteria which the Pakistanis were required to meet in order for this status to continue. Every year, virtually every year, the Europeans have been giving the Pakistanis a pass on all those waivers. Have been giving a waiver on all those conditions which they had mandated that Pakistan needs to show progress on, mostly related to labor rights, human rights, and stuff like that. This year, however, what happened was that this matter has now gained greater currency and salience in the European Union, in large part because of what Pakistan has been doing. The Pakistanis have been, very, very active on issues of blasphemy. Imran Khan has been shooting his mouth off. Some of his ministers have been making blood-curdling calls on Twitter, on their Twitter handles. These are sitting cabinet ministers. And this whole show has been going on for a fair bit of time. The Europeans have been taking it. But after this whole fracas with the French started, I think that might have pushed the Europeans a little bit to start cracking the whip. And the resolution which has been passed in the European Parliament right now, it's still not an executive decision which has been taken. I think given the kind of bureaucracy which exists in Europe, it'll take some time. But I think it's a very strong message to Pakistan that until and unless, they start cleaning up their act, start behaving like a normal country, stop, calling for murder and all sorts of other things against people with a different point of view, a different opinion, people, who might not agree to their concepts of blasphemy, etc. Until and unless they pipe down on all of that, this is a stick which could be wielded against Pakistan. This now creates a huge problem for the Pakistanis because both at the diplomatic and political level, it's a huge rebuff. But more importantly, on the economic plane, Europe is one of Pakistan's largest markets. And if this GSP plus is going to be withdrawn, the competitiveness of Pakistani products, which in any case is very, very iffy, comes down drastically, and the chances are that the Pakistanis will lose a lot of market share. Their exports to European Union is going to go down, and that's going to create its own problems on the Pakistan economy, which is already gasping for breath, desperately trying to increase their exports, which have been static for the last at least 5 or 6 years, or near static for the last 5-6 years. So clearly, I think the Europeans have decided that this is a leverage which they need to start exercising, and which is why we've seen the kind of resolution which was passed recently.
Sushant, there are 57, 58 countries in the OIC, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. Now, in the past also, these countries have sort of protested against blasphemy coming out of, especially Denmark, Norway. Now, of course, they're talking about France. They've protested, but the protests have always been diplomatic. They've been measured. There have been lone wolf attacks, sure. But at the same time, you haven't seen the kind of reactions that have come out of the Pakistani parliament with open slogans on the floor of the National Assembly saying, Sartan se juda, calling for beheading of those who insult the Prophet. Now, why is it that the rest of the OIC and Pakistan, because those are also Muslim countries, now why is it that Pakistan has chosen to behave differently than even Saudi Arabia, which is the heart of Islam, even Iran, which is hardline Islamist, even Indonesia, Malaysia, or any other country for that matter? Why is Pakistan this different case study altogether?
Gaurav, that's the billion or the $10 billion question. See, the point is that most other countries are actually normal countries. And, in the West, for example, if they've taken a certain step or a certain action and you protest it, you resent it, that's perfectly fine. You are entitled to do that, and you can have a conversation with that. But when you have the kind of scenes we've seen in the Pakistani parliament, when on an issue where you don't agree with the other side, you demand that you break off diplomatic relations, you demand that you hang the blasphemers, your own diaspora or people who are mostly illegal immigrants in places like France, who have run away from Pakistan, this great fortress of Islam, Pakistan. These guys have run away to make something of their life to Europe. One of those guys takes a knife and goes and starts stabbing people outside what he thinks is the Charlie Hebdo office. Then you clearly have a very serious problem on your hands. And then it's not just the guy who goes and stabs them, but his family is then lauded as heroes. And they say that the son has done something so great that they will now get, a straight direct ticket to heaven. When you have this kind of nonsense happening in your country, then it clearly means that you have a major problem. You are not a normal state, you are not a normal people, you are not a normal country. I think that is where the disconnect is coming between Pakistan and how it reacts and how the rest of the world reacts. Okay, in Pakistan, there is also this issue that, Islam has been politicized or weaponized in a way that now this is coming back to bite the Pakistanis. So there is a political angle, domestic political angle to it as well. But I think somewhere along the line, there is a sense of insecurity, there's a sense of inferiority, there is a sense that maybe we have to prove ourselves to be better Muslims than all other Muslims. People in the Arab world, people in other parts of the world who are Muslims are very comfortable with their identity as Muslims and their identity as global citizens as well. Not the Pakistanis. For them, even more important than Pakistani citizenship is actually being a Muslim. How many times will you come across a Pakistani when you ask him, so where are you from? He says, I'm a Muslim. That's his first reaction. And then he says, yes, I'm from Pakistan. So clearly there is a certain sense of insecurity, inferiority, and they think they need to, wear their Islam on their chest, which many other Muslims don't feel the need to do. They might have problems and they might resent what they consider to be blasphemous acts, which is fair enough. You can get angry about something or a certain amount of cultural insensitivity or what you perceive to be cultural insensitivity on the other side. But to then start, and some of it we are seeing in India as well. Let's not forget that we've seen these Tan Se Juda rallies in Bareilly and some of these other places. So some of that virus also, has infected people in India, Muslims in India. But by and large, things are still somewhat calmer out here. Whether they stay that way or not, I don't know. But Pakistan, of course, is completely, it's gone completely haywire.
Sushant, I couldn't agree with you more. Now, I watch Pakistani media very carefully, and one thing that has come out is that it seems to be fractured. Now, there are people who are saying that while we are nobody respects the Prophet more than I do, and nobody respects the Prophet more than I do, and there seems to be this huge competition in Pakistan who respects the Prophet more. That's number one. However, they also realize that if things go south, if this actually is a resolution, if this actually happens on ground, Pakistan will not be able to economically recover because we are talking about 7 to 8 billion US dollars per year, which is extremely substantial for a country like Pakistan. For Pakistan, it is make or break. But nobody in the Pakistani media or Pakistani parliament is able to say it convincingly that no, we need the French, and there is a more civilized way if somebody has insulted the Prophet. And by the way, Sushant, they did not say get rid of your blasphemy laws in so many words. They said it is being misused to target minorities, which is a fact. It is being misused. And then they said that, these kind of laws, blasphemy laws are there in Europe also in quite a few countries. But nobody gets hanged for it. Nobody gets lynched for it. But it's happening in Pakistan. So what's your sensing? Why is there such a sense of fracture, if I may use the word, in the Pakistani media and the Pakistani parliament?
Yeah, Gaurav, see, this is again the fundamental problem, isn't it? The kind of hypocrisy which you see in Pakistan, especially among the Pakistani elite, especially among, these so-called big news anchors, we can't break relations with France because, there is so much money involved. So the people on the ground are calling out your hypocrisy. They are saying that, look, if you are so committed to the honor of the Prophet, okay, you are so anti-blasphemy, you are such a Ashiq-e-Rasool, then how come that when it comes to France or America or anybody else, you suddenly, lose your nerve? How does that match up to the claims you're making? So this rank hypocrisy of the elite Pakistani or the guy who has some kind of a pulpit between what he says publicly and what he practices, I think that is also creating all sorts of problems for these guys. And until and unless they resolve that, until and unless they stop saying that, look, I am willing to do all this, but please don't go after France, until they stop making this kind of a juxtaposition, I don't see how they're going to get over this, because their hypocrisy will always be called out. Because in the first instance, there will be a mob out to lynch you. If you get saved from the mob, you will be thrown into jail where you might get killed. If you manage to survive jail, your court case, and most of these people are poor Christians, some poor Muslims as well, who can't fight back. or who don't have the resources to fight back, who don't have the backing to fight back. The same charge was leveled against Sherry Rehman, but because she is the elite of the elite, she got away with it, right? Beyond a point, nobody pressed the issue against her. But if it was some Christian fellow or some poor Muslim fellow, the moment that the charge is levied, it's like a death sentence. So you go through the court case. If you get acquitted from court, which is very unlikely, if you get acquitted, then and you come back into society, you can't live out there because this charge is hanging over your head like a sword, which can drop any time, and somebody can get it in his head that he has to kill you and earn rewards for himself and the rest of his family in the afterlife. Now, if when you have created this kind of a mindset, you have cultivated it, you have assiduously cultivated it, then you expect that, okay, guys, stop doing all this. Let's go back to being normal. I'm sorry, it's not an electricity switch which you can turn on and turn off whenever you want to. It doesn't work that way, and they are realizing it with the rise of something like the TLP now.
Now that Sushant, you mentioned the TLP, I'd like to ask you, do you think, if you look at the two-nation theory, and if you look at the heart and soul of Pakistan, one of the two nations on earth which were created, at least in the modern times, on the basis of religion, do you think that the TLP are actually inheritors of Pakistan? While I may have my own objections against the TLP, but at least those peoples are not what they say, munafiq. They're not hypocrites. They say this is an Islamic state. They say Pakistan was created in the name of Islam, where you cannot compromise on the honor of the Prophet. So I don't understand that TLP, which is a political party, right, which came, I think, number 3 in Punjab and won a couple of seats in Sindh also. I don't understand what the TLP is doing wrong. And all the violence that was inflicted upon the TLP, and the TLP also retaliated later on. But at the same time, if you go back to the previous demands, right, throwing out the French ambassador or not throwing him out is something that can be discussed threadbare, because even if you throw out the French ambassador, what guarantee is there that tomorrow there will not be another case of blasphemy in France? And if you end diplomatic relations with France, what are you going to do if a Frenchman tomorrow decides to draw another cartoon? You can do nothing. But at the same time, what is your sensei?
No. Gaurav, you're wrong. Gaurav, you're completely wrong. What do you mean that you can't do anything? You can burn your own country down to take revenge against France, which is what most of these guys have been doing all along. They burned their own country down, thinking that this is going to hurt France. And I would encourage them to continue doing that. But besides that, look, you're right. Unlike most of the other politico-religious parties in Pakistan, like the JUI, which is a Deobandi leaning party or a Deobandi school party, the Jamaat-e-Islami, and some of these others, many of these guys originally were opposed to the creation of Pakistan. The Barelvis, on the other hand, who, it's a bit of a misnomer to call them Sufis. The Barelvis were on the forefront of the demand for Pakistan, whether in Punjab or in UP and Bihar. These were the guys who were in the vanguard of the Pakistan movement, right? So yes, you are absolutely right. They are in the forefront of, they are the true inheritors of what Pakistan is supposed to be. And what they are demanding is what was promised to their forefathers who voted for Pakistan or who rooted for Pakistan. So yes, they're doing nothing wrong in the kind of demands they are making, number one. Number two, look at their charter of demands. What are they asking for? They're asking for the reason why Pakistan was made, which was an Islamic state. And I use the Islamic State. I always tell you I use the term Islamic State advisedly because it's not an Islamic Republic really. It's more like an Islamic State or the ISIS variety, especially when it comes to minorities. But what the TLP is saying is that, look, you promised us this, so we want Nizam-e-Mustafa. And because the Barelvis are in a majority, Nizam-e-Mustafa is Islamic law according to the Barelvi school. Right? So there is nothing wrong in it. Number three, they are not a terrorist party. They might have, adopted street power. They might have done violent demonstrations and all of that. But to call them a terrorist party, which they're certainly not. So out there also, I don't see how they will be able to prove that these guys are terrorists. And finally, I think the sheer fact that these guys are representing a sentiment which is there in among many Muslims, especially among the underclass, which has been indoctrinated over the last 70 years on this whole Islamic thing. Uh, I think you are facing the blowback of the success of your indoctrination program. That is what is happening right now. And clearly, for anybody to think that just banning the TLP is going to, turn this whole thing around and you'll be able to get over it, I don't think that's the way it's going to work.
Now, Sushant, my last question to you is, whether it's GSP Plus or, the FATF meeting is around the corner again. What do you see as the future as far as Pakistan's relationship with Europe and the Western world go? Because Pakistan is hemorrhaging, if I may say, economically. Economically, it's going south very rapidly. What do you think is going to happen in the near future? 2 minutes.
Look, personally, I think a sort of a point of inflection has been reached. I don't think the Europeans are going to sever connections with Pakistan just yet, but I think they have shown them the red flag. I think they've shown them the big stick. But yes, I think there are very serious strains now which are emerging in this relationship. But not just with Europe. I think it's going to happen with the IMF. I think it's going to happen with the US when it comes to Afghanistan. So a lot of things, as far as the West is concerned, are somewhat on a knife's edge right now. Which way they kindly, the cookie crumbles, we can't say right now. But the Pakistanis will try to retract, will try to step back. So will the others not want to step forward just yet, because some of the old calculations vis-a-vis Pakistan in the West, I think, continue to remain in play. They haven't gone out of play. And as long as that is the case, I don't think there will be any precipitate action which we are likely to see anytime soon. But I think the warning has been sounded, and it is up to Pakistan whether they start cleaning up their act or they continue down the same path, and one fine day the axe will drop.
Thank you very much for joining us, Sushant. Ladies and gentlemen, with Sushant Sareen, we discussed a lot of topics. We discussed, the impact of GSP Plus. We discussed that FATF is around the corner, how it will impact Pakistan, and why this dichotomy in Pakistan. On one side, their parliamentarians or people in the National Assembly claim that they are extremely religious. At the same time, they say that no, we must have a relationship with France also. It is a mixture of opposites, this nation called Pakistan. Thank you for joining me. I'll see you again next week with another special guest. Till then, from my team and I on Blitzkrieg, it's Jai Hind.